Hi, this is Mashnu, and I've been analyzing your game, so here is the video. You tell me that this game where you played black is a turn-based game, so let's say that's the modern version of correspondence chess. I used to play correspondence chess when I was young, and it was of course before internet existed. So we wrote the move on a postcard and sent it to each other, and that was the old-fashioned way. That costed quite a lot of money because you have to pay a stamp each time for each move. But now it's great that we have this option of turn-based chess on the internet. One thing is important about turn-based chess is that if we really want to improve by playing correspondence chess, by playing turn-based chess, it's important to not to play too many games at the same time, and also to really take your time for each move, because many of us play many games at the same time, and then you see there are so many games where it's your move that we tend to play too fast sometimes. Now I'm not saying that this is the case in this game. I don't know how much time you took for each move, but it's a tendency. Somehow people want to see as fast as possible the result of their game, so they start playing very fast, and in fact then it becomes a kind of blitz game. So that being a general advice, if you play turn-based chess, just keep the amount of games to well, perhaps 5 games, or not much more than that, and then really take your time for each move, because that's the interesting thing about turn-based chess. You can take your time, you can use often this analyze board to go through variations before you make a decision. But well, let's go now to the game that you played. Your opponent opened with e4 and you played the Sicilian defense, c5, and your opponent didn't want to go into the main variations. He played c3. That is a move that, well, most Sicilian players don't like very much when white does this c3, because we get a complete different type of position than we are used to and than we want to with black. So in fact we can say that this c3 variation with white is a kind of psychological weapon to get you out of what you are used to. You continue with knight to f6, and your opponent advances this pawn. That's the most played move in this position, e5. The knight goes to d5, and then he plays here d4. You take on d4 and he takes with a c pawn. So we have this symmetrical pawn formation, in the sense that we both have this open c file. Here you continue with knight to c6. A more common move in this position, by the way, is the move d6. d6, that's the most played move here, and normally things continue with knight to f3 here, and then knight to c6. So it's perhaps a different move order, but there is also a difference in the let's say the planning in the opening. Black is here in fact trying to make this e5 pawn weak by attacking it d6 with the idea of later perhaps trading it and making it a target. Let's have a short look at how this variation continues, because here knight to c4 is the most played move, and now the knight that is attacked on b6 on d5 goes to b6, attacking the bishop, and the bishop often goes to b5, now pinning the knight on c6. And this is the moment for black to take on e5, and then knight takes e5 is the consequence. White is threatening to take on c6, so bishop d7 is needed now. Well, this is how things can develop in this variation. Knight takes d7, queen takes d7, knight to c3 developing, and now black plays e6. We can say that as a result of this approach by black, white has an isolated d pawn now, so that in the future can become a target. It's not very easy to say general truths about isolated queen pawns. I mean, there are many books written about this theme of isolated queen pawn, because some people like very much to play with an isolated d-pawn, because it's often, the consequence is often that white gets quite a lot of open space for his pieces, and sometimes the option of advancing this pawn. And on the other hand, there are players that want to play against this isolated queen's pawn, so in this case with black, because if you reach an endgame, then you have advantage with black, because this pawn becomes a target. But well, that about this variation in the opening. Let's continue with the game, because you played knight to c6, which is also a good move, although it's not the most played move. Knight to c3, and now queen to a5. Very logical move, trying to make use of this pin here on c3. And here your opponent played queen to d3, and that is a tactical mistake. You spotted it immediately and played the best move in the position, knight to b4. In fact, you are winning material here, and you are getting a very good position with this. Now let's a short look what would have been good. Well, most logical and normal move would be bishop to d2 for your opponent, and then you can take on d4. Perhaps this is the reason why your opponent didn't want to play bishop to d2, because he was afraid that you would take here. Well, this is the consequence, that in fact white has to sacrifice this pawn in order to get some play. Well, let's return to the game, because that's the most important thing. He did queen to d3, not a good move, and you punished it immediately by knight to b4. He went back with a queen to d4, and now the consequence is that you can take on d4 because of this fork on c2. If queen takes, knight c2 check wins the queen. So he continued with bishop to d3, and here you played queen to e5 check, taking the second pawn. Well, we could say here that if white doesn't have much compensation for these two pawns, we already have an almost won position with black. Let's see how it continued. Knight g to e2, so white is trying to develop as fast as possible to get play with his pieces, and that's something to notice, that both black bishops are not developed yet, so we need to think about development here, and that's exactly what you do. You play e6, so your bishop, the dark square bishop, can come out. Your opponent castled, and now you play the move b6 in order to develop the other bishop. a3 now played by your opponent. This is a moment where probably your attention, your awareness diminished a bit, because you missed a tactic here. There is a simple fork on b3 with your knight. You went back with your knight to c6, but instead of this, knight to b3 could fork queen and rook. So if the queen goes to d1, then we don't take immediately on a1, of course, because then he takes the b4 knight, and then probably the bishop, the knight on a1 will not escape. So we first take on d3, and now after queen takes d3, now we can take the rook, and we then have won material. We have won a rook now, and well, most probably this knight is going to be lost, but then still we have won the exchange. So these are things that in correspondence chess, or in turn-based chess, I keep using this old word, correspondence chess, but well, in turn-based chess we have actually all the time and all the options to analyze positions and to see how lines could develop. So this is actually one of those moments where perhaps you play too fast, I don't know, but there was this beautiful tactic here with knight to b3, and then first trading on d3 before taking the rook. Let's continue with the game. Knight to c6. rook to e1. Here in fact still there was the option of playing knight to b3. This is very well, not strange, but very common in fact, that once we miss a certain tactical pattern, we keep missing it. I've seen it in many games that people miss one idea and then the next move is still possible, but they miss it again because somehow in our concentration we are thinking about something different, so we don't even think about those things. Like for example here, most probably you saw the consequence of rook to e1 is that there is a possible discovered attack by moving the knight away, and so perhaps in your thoughts, in your thought process, you thought, okay, this is happening, so I have to move my queen away from there, and so you played queen to c7. Well, if we look at the fact that with knight to b3 you attack his queen, so it's no problem if he moves this knight away, because you can take his queen as well. Let's have a short look at knight to g3. Then you take on d2, and after he takes, you take the rook. So this is not dangerous for you. It's winning. Another option, of course, is that he moves his queen away. But then we have, just as before, we have this rook on a1 that is hanging. So knight takes e1. Now there is not really a very good place for this knight to go attacking your queen, so there's not much danger. Perhaps a better idea for white would be to develop this bishop with tempo. Now your queen has to move, for example to f6, and then the knight falls. But well, if we look at the position, we need to develop as fast as possible with black castle kingside, or yeah, castle kingside, and you are ahead in material, and this is just good for black. But well, let's go to the game, because here you thought about the safety of your queen and played queen to c7. Now he took on d4, you took again, and well, we see actually here that white now is getting compensation for his for the pawns that he lost, since we still haven't developed much. And here there was also a possible double attack by your opponent. He could have played bishop to e4. By bishop to e4 he attacks your rook and attacks your knight, so in fact we are almost forced to play either knight to c6 or knight to b3 attacking the queen and the rook. Let's have a look at knight to c6. There is another tempo move here for white. He can attack your queen now by playing the knight to b5, so the queen has to go back to his initial square, and here white is having quite a lot of compensation for his lost pawns, because the dark squares here are getting a bit weak. For example, queen to f4 is very strong here, threatening this check on c7. So here things start getting a bit dangerous for black. We cannot play d6, because then bishop takes c6 check with capturing the rook. So here we can say black is in trouble. The other option is to move the knight to b3, attacking the queen and attacking the rook. Now the queen must move. Let's say to d1. We can take this rook, and he takes our rook on a8. And here, well, the problem is we cannot save this this knight here. Perhaps we can play bishop to a6 to develop this bishop, or to play the other bishop out simply to e7 in order to castle later. And then after we have castled, and after we have sought for some activity of our pieces, we can get back into the game. But in fact we can say that white has compensation here. His pieces are active or easily activated. He has castled, his rook is in the middle, our king is still uncastled. So this is not very bad for white. I think he has a good compensation. But well, in the game he missed this option of playing bishop to e4. Your opponent played queen to g5, attacking, well, not really attacking g7 because it's defended, but preventing your bishop from developing. This was his idea. You continued here with bishop to b7, logical development move. Bishop to e3 attacks your knight, and here we play h6. So the queen must make a decision now where to go. Queen to h4 was played, and now you went with your knight to b3. Well, it's a bit late, let's say, because there is no fork anymore, but of course it's still a good move. The knight can later go back to c5, where it controls some central squares. Right now the rook on a1 is attacked, so it goes to d1. Here you played a6 to prevent the knight from c3 going to b5. Of course, that's a very good idea. By the way, knight c5 was also a good alternative. Bishop to c4. Now you go to a5 with the knight. Well, since things have changed, let's say, it's a good idea now, this knight to a5, because you are winning a tempo attacking this this bishop on c4. So in this position, knight to a5 perhaps is a bit better than knight to c5, as it was before. Here you force white to react to your moves and to move his bishop away. In fact, white is now in a moment where he has to decide whether to stay with his bishop on this diagonal here or on this diagonal. He chose for bishop to d3, placing the bishop on the diagonal towards h7. Perhaps it would have been good for white to bring the bishop simply to a2 and stay here, with the idea of later using this diagonal to a possible attack, and also preventing you to advance the e pawn or the d pawn and the e pawn in the future. So, but it's difficult to make this type of decisions. Also in my games, when I have this type of decisions, what diagonal is the best for me? It's something we have to actually to look a bit in the future, to think, okay, where would be my chances be, and then make a decision. And well, anyway, your opponent played the bishop to d3, where it's blocking a bit his rook, and he hopes to get some play here on this diagonal here, g6 and h7. You continue with bishop to e7, attacking the queen now. Queen to g4. Now g7 is attacked, so you play the move g5, and that's well, very compromising, in fact, because by playing g5 you are saying that you are going to advance these kingside pawns, and you forget about cancelling kingside. Cancelling queenside for black would be risky as well because of the open c-file. So in fact, we are saying here with black that we are going to stay for a while with the king in the middle. Now the middle of the board doesn't seem so safe because of these two rooks placed here in the middle. So I don't want to say that this is wrong to play g5, but it is something to be very aware of, that this is a risk that we are taking. In fact, we are playing here, let's say, a kind of all or nothing chess that is the style of many adventurous players. That has, of course, also its beautiful things, because when you win with this type of risky choices, you can get beautiful attacks and things like that. But well, it is compromising in the sense that your king stays in the center now, and it's the question whether white will be able to attack it later or not. Your opponent played here f4, and I think this is not a good reaction of white to your move. he is now opening the diagonal from g1 to c5, so that can give us possible ideas to open the position later, to play, for example, bishop to c5 at some point. And also it gives us the option also to open some files here on the king side, and that's exactly what black wants. Wants to later open some files there. Now this is not the right moment to take, of course, on f4, because if we take on f4, then bishop takes f4, attacking the queen, and he again has the initiative. A better move for your opponent would have been rook to c1 simply. Again, having this rook on the same file as the queen, so the queen must move, queen to d6 perhaps, and then the other rook can go to d1, again with the same idea. So then he could make use of this vulnerability of the black queen. But in the game he played f4, and you continued with h5, which is actually winning a tempo and advancing the pawns. That was your plan. Queen goes to g3, and now you continue with h4. Queen is attacked one more time, so it goes to f2, and here is threatening, of course, to take on b6, attacking both queen and knight. So you need to do something against that, and that's exactly what you do. You play the knight to c4 with a clear threat of taking on e3. Knight takes e3, and after rook takes e3, then bishop to c5. So here we see already what the consequences of this f4 move that he did. Opening this diagonal is inviting black to find some tactics. But well, he spotted this threat, so he took now the knight. You took back with the queen, and now he took on g5. Here you continued very courageous your attack with h3, and I think this is good. It looks as a good decision to advance this pawn and try to damage the pawn structure that is defending the white king. He plays g3, and now queen to c6, because a new diagonal has been opened towards the white king. Actually, the white king is becoming more and more vulnerable here, in danger, because of this f4 and g3 moves that he has done. So we can say that here the pawn that he has taken here on g5, you have more than enough compensation for this by this this open king situation that he has. And your king is still in the center, but it looks to be safe since black is having the initiative now with these threats of queen to h1, checkmate. Now, to prevent this checkmate, he went with his king to f1, and here you made a interesting decision. You chose to trade queens by playing queen to g2 check, and this is in fact such a complicated position. There are so many possibilities to think about. We could, for example, say we can try to increase the pressure by playing rook to g8, wanting to capture here on g5. Another idea would be we can try to advance the f pawn immediately by playing f5. If we play f5, if he takes here, then he gets in trouble, I think, because you can simply retake. He cannot take with the queen because of rook f8, using again this vulnerable situation, this dangerous open space around the white king. I think that this is one of the instructive moments in the game. as you know, when we look at a position, we always must think, okay, what are the weaknesses of the opponent, what are my own weaknesses, and then start making a plan. And we could say here that in this position, one of the characteristics is this king that is in such open space, the king and the queen on the same file, all these open diagonals and possibilities to open files here. And that's why I think that it would be a good decision here to play either f5 or rook to g8. By trading queens, we get suddenly into a completely different type of position. It's not longer about the king in danger after trading queens. It's suddenly about a very strange type of endgame that we could enter. Strange, I say, because we have this connected passed pawn, 3 of them in the center, but it's difficult to advance them. One of the things that we are missing here in black's position is the connection of the 2 rooks, and because of that I understand that strategically seen is your decision of castling queenside here correct, because then you connect both rooks and you can try to use them. The bad thing about it is that you missed simply that this bishop is attacking the b6 pawn. Once the b6 pawn falls, there is then another characteristic in the position. Let's go there. Castling kingside, bishop takes b6, the rook goes away to g8. Here, if we look at the position, we can see that there is a pawn majority for white on this side. So suddenly, eventually in an endgame, he has this this weapon on the queen side. So things start changing, and his pieces are still active. The 2 rooks, well, they are now together, but it's not really achieving much yet here on this side. Later in the game you manage to capture on h2 and to go to h1 with your rook. Right here it's not that clear. He played h4 now, and you continue with f5. Knight goes to e2. He wants to go to f4 or to d4, and you found here that your chances, and that's a very correct thought, that your chances are in the fact that you have these 3 connected passed pawns. You need to create some threats with these pawns. But wait a minute, because I'm skipping actually one thing that I have to discuss, and that is the alternative to castling queenside here. To save this pawn, playing b5 is I think the correct thing to do. After this, let's say he plays bishop to f4 to try to control these dark squares here, then rook to c8 perhaps, or do we have anything with bishop b, c5 check, bishop c5 check, the bishop then goes back to e3, then rook c8, something like that. At least now there is no pawn majority here for white, and your king is not in danger. He doesn't have much material to attack here. These rooks are well placed, but without the queens and without 2 other light pieces, there is not much firepower of white to attack your king. So I think this could be a good alternative. Let's see, in the game, castling queenside, bishop takes b6, rook to g8, h4, f5, knight goes to e2, and now you decide to use your weapons by advancing the central pawns. This can become very dangerous for white if he allows you to advance these pawns. He gave a check now on c1, bishop to c6, knight to d4 now, so he's using this pin of the pawn here on e5. bishop to g5 is a nice small tactic that you found. That's correct. And here he took on g5 immediately. This gave you the option of playing rook to h1 check. So now again we are returning to this idea of the vulnerability of the white king and this pass pawn on g2. It's strange actually about this pass pawn on g2 that if you ask a computer engine to evaluate this position, it will give you a massive advantage for black. But this is how computers are programmed. They are programmed to evaluate a position according to certain things that they see, and if they see that you have a pass pawn on the 7th rank, then they give you lots of points. But as you saw in the game, this is not only what counts, because this pawn is well blocked and we don't have a dark square bishop now to eventually try to control this g1 square. So that's why it's not that easy to evaluate this position. He went to f2 now, and here you decided to take on e1. I'm not sure if without trading the rooks you would have a much better position or one position, but as a principle we can say that if we have opposite colored bishops, we can let's say that the chances for a draw become bigger as the other pieces are being traded. Yeah, so that means that here trading the rook on e1 makes the chances for a draw bigger. There are more chances for a draw. If you keep the rooks on the board, I mean, white is not threatening to take on h1 because you simply retake queen, and if rook takes then bishop takes, so you win material. So we could take here on d4 as well. Now I have been analyzing this position for quite a long time, and it's actually too complicated to say whether this is this gives you real concrete winning chances or not. It's not easy for both sides. Here bishop takes d4, you can take now on g5, and he can try to advance it with this pawn majority on the queen side with b4. And the question is now how to make a plan here with black. It's not easy. It's not very easy to find activity with this rook. I try to find for some ideas of going this way, to g6, d6 and d2, but there's not really a way to enter that easily. This bishop can control all the dark squares. If you place the bishop at a certain point on f4, then he controls this d2 and e3 square. I thought also, okay, what about if we, well, first of all let's unpin our own bishop by playing king to b7. He can go to e5 with the idea of going to f4 later. If we go to e4 now, placing our bishop on a strong field here and blocking one of his rooks, he could simply start waiting here by rook to g1. d5 is possible. It looks as if we have two pass pawns now here that can advance, but it's not the fact, not the reality, because he controls all the dark squares because of this opposite colored bishops. So I'm not sure what are the chances here of black. I did see a certain way to activate the pieces in this following variation. It's interesting. If you place here bishop to d4, you could play rook to h5. The idea is to go with a rook to h3 and at a certain point advancing the pawn to f4, so then the rook can give a check on f3. That's a possible plan. If you place a4 now to advance his own majority, rook to h3, b5. Well, first a trade on b5 and then f4. And this becomes interesting now, because if he takes, then we have rook to d3 or rook to f3 check. both moves are interesting, because now we are getting our pieces working together. We are all focused on the options of trying to make use of this pass pawn on g2, get this pawn on f4 to take it. Still the chances for a draw are very present because of these opposite colored bishops and because of the control of the dark squares. And the promotion square for the g pawn is the dark square. That's the what is good for white. Later, when I saw this option, I thought, okay, what if white tries to prevent this by playing, instead of bishop to d4, to play bishop to f4 here, and then the whole plan of this f4 idea doesn't count anymore. So we stay with this a bit frustrating fact that even if that we have more material here, we're a pawn up and we have this pawn already on this second rank, it's not easy to find a way to continue. Well, in the game you traded the rooks, and now the problem for black is this inactive rook on g8, and here of course you take first on d4, he takes with the bishop. We don't have any longer connected pass pawns now, so this power is less now. You take now on g5, bishop to e5, rook h5, rook to g1, king b7, and here you agree to draw. And I search for possible ideas, possible plans to continue this this position, but I didn't find a winning line for black. I think it's correct to agree a draw here. On the other hand, you can always try it with black. It's not really very, the chance is not very big that white makes a big mistake or anything like that, but well, you never know. Perhaps in correspondence chess it's something that is good to agree a draw. If this would be an over the board game, and let's say that you both are entering in time trouble, so around move 40 now, then it could be an idea to continue to see if your opponent makes a mistake. But just looking at the let's say theoretical aspect of the position, the draw chances are simply very big here. He could even try to create some counter chances by advancing this majority on the queen side, but well, your king is very well defending this, and the light squares are controlled by you, so no danger there. Alright, so let's have a short look at the most important parts of the game. You see, in the opening you spotted a very good tactical idea of knight to b4 that gave you big advantage, and then after you had gained this advantage, you missed this second tactic with knight to b3. I don't know, perhaps sometimes it happens that when we have some advantage we tend to relax our mind and to think that, okay, now I have a better position, so it must be easy to continue, and not to think we tend to lose our sharpness sometimes. So this is important, whether even in positions that you think that you have a won position, still keep concentrated to the maximum. It helps me in those cases to literally think the thoughts, here anything can happen, I can even lose this game. So then I concentrate to the maximum. Another thought that helps me in those kind of situations is to imagine that my opponent is a grandmaster who will see everything. So then I'm forced to really have a look at the position and really calculate the most important lines. But well, here knight to b3 was possible, you missed this tactic, and again knight to b3 was possible here. And then we see this situation where actually white gets activity of his pieces, he has a lead in development, and that's the advantage, that, let's say, the compensation that he has. So we need to try to develop as fast as possible with black. I wonder if here, by the way, knight to b3, knight to c6 is also possible. No, knight to b3 is okay, because later you found good squares for your knight, and here knight to c5 later can be played, so this is okay. And here you continue, try to develop, and this is actually, I find, the most important part of the game, the decision to advance this pawn. That is promising. On the other hand, can become risky if your king becomes in danger, gets in danger, but it didn't happen in the game. He reacted not the correct way by playing f4 here, and you could advance these pawns now. And we got to this situation where all these open diagonals start playing a role. And this is the second most important position, where you chose for queen to g2, trading the queens. And we had, if we want to continue the attack, and I think that's something that is close to your playing style, is to continue the attack, since see that you advance this g pawn and try to go for the white king. I would say, see in this kind of positions the fact that the king is still on open space. This f-file, if we open this f-file, then we have a very good position, attacking possibilities. So here, not trading queens, but playing rook to g8 or f5 are very good options to try to continue the attack. And of course it's also a bit risky, because we are advancing a pawn that is around our own king, so it's impossible here to calculate completely. The lines are just too long to calculate what the outcome will be. But in general terms, we can say that this could be a way to continue the initiative, because after trading queens we get into this other type of position. Well, here this pawn on b6 was lost, and we got into this position where now the advance of the e-pawn, later the e-pawn was lost because of this move, knight to d4. Let's see just one more time. Instead of advancing the e-pawn right now, is there anything else that we can try? Perhaps blocking the... no, bishop to e4 doesn't look that good to place. Well, in fact, if we want to advance up the central pawns, we need the rooks on e8 and d8. But on the other hand, if we do that, perhaps these pawns will start advancing. So this is a very difficult situation to make a decision. e5, rook c1 check, bishop to c6 is the only good move, because otherwise if you go to b8 then he gives check on c7 and captures on e5. And here knight to d4 is a nice move that he found. What I don't like about this position now is that we lose the connection of the passed pawns in the center. But I think there is no other option here, then, because he's threatening to take on c6 and moving king to b7. Then he takes, we take back, and then again the d5 pawn, the e5 pawn is undefended. So I think this is the only option. In fact, take, check, and then taking here. But well, the power of the passed pawns of black is diminishing, and we get already in a situation that where the draw chances are very big here, because of the control of the dark squares on g1. So okay, this is a possible continuation, but I think it's correct here that you agree to draw. Alright, well, this is what I can tell you about what I see in your game and in your play. I think lessons that can be learned is to stay sharp, to stay concentrated in positions where you see that you have advantage, not to relax, and also to once you start an attack, to always to look at possibilities to continue attacking, and always the plans that you choose must be based on characteristics of a position. If you would have looked at the characteristics of the position before this queen trade, then I think, let's say here, then you would have found, I think, the ideas of playing f5 or playing rook to g8. But well, perhaps you considered them and you thought it was too risky. That's also possible. Anyway, I hope you found this video and my vision to your game helpful, and I wish you lots of joy and success in chess. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye. Thanks.